Welcome to Macomb Paranormal Investigations and Research. I am your host, Don Alter. We are traveling to one of Michigan's most tragic and historically significant places. On this battlefield, the past feels heavy, where the land carries the memory of bloodshed, and where many believe the dead have never fully left. This is the story of the River Raisin battlefield in Monroe, Michigan. The River Raisin battlefield is remembered today as one of the most devastating sites connected to the War of 1812. It was here, in the bitter cold of January 1813, that American troops suffered one of their worst defeats of the war. It was here that wounded prisoners were left behind, homes were burned, and the phrase, "Remember the Raisin," became a battle cry of grief, anger, and revenge. More than 200 years later, the battlefield is preserved as River Raisin National Battlefield Park, the only national battlefield park in the United States dedicated to the War of 1812. But beyond the official history, there is another side to this place. Visitors and paranormal investigators have reported strange voices, shadowy figures, apparitions of soldiers, unexplained lights, and the feeling that something unseen still moves across the land. When people think of haunted battlefields, they often think of Gettysburg, Antietam, or other famous Civil War locations. But Michigan has its own battlefield, filled with tragedy and ghostly legend. River Raisin is not just a historic location. It is a place where military failure, human suffering, frontier violence, and spiritual mystery converge. To understand why so many believe this battlefield is haunted, we first have to understand what happened there. Long before the sound of cannon fire and musket shots echoed across the frozen ground, the River Raisin area was a place of life. Native people lived in and traveled through this region for generations. The river, marshland, woods, and access to Lake Erie made the area important for fishing, hunting, farming, trade, and travel. Several native nations were connected to this land, including the Potawatomi, Wyandot, Odawa, Ojibwe, Shawnee, Delaware, Miami, and others throughout the Great Lakes region. Later, French settlers established farms along the river, creating a small community known as Frenchtown. It was a settlement of homes, fields, fences, barns, and families. It was not built to be a battlefield. It was not designed as a military stronghold. It was a civilian community that found itself trapped in the middle of a much larger war. That is one of the reasons River Raisin feels so different from some other battlefield sites. The violence did not happen on an empty stretch of land, far from daily life. It happened in and around homes, along farms, near the riverbank, and inside a community where ordinary people had once lived in peace. The War of 1812 was a complicated conflict. It involved the United States, Great Britain, Canada, and native nations who were fighting to protect their homelands from American expansion. In the Great Lakes region, the war was especially intense. Control of Detroit, Lake Erie, and the surrounding territory was critical. Whoever controlled those routes controlled movement, supplies, military strategy, and influence in the region. In August of 1812, the United States suffered a humiliating defeat when General William Hull surrendered Detroit to the British. With that surrender, the British gained control of Detroit and the Michigan Territory. For Americans living on the frontier, this was shocking. Detroit was a strategic location, and losing it placed American settlements and military plans in danger. After the fall of Detroit, American forces began preparing a campaign to retake the territory. General William Henry Harrison, who would later become President of the United States, was placed in command of the Army of the Northwest. Under his command was General James Winchester, a Revolutionary War veteran leading troops from Kentucky. Many of these men were volunteers and militia. They were brave and rugged, but they were also fighting under difficult conditions. They marched through freezing weather, deep snow, poor roads, and wilderness. Supplies were limited. Communication was slow. Orders were delayed. The winter campaign was harsh, and in January of 1813, a series of decisions would lead them into disaster. At that time, General Winchester and his men were near the Maumee Rapids, close to present-day Toledo, Ohio. They were waiting for support and further instruction. Then word reached them that Frenchtown, along the river Raisin, was occupied by British-aligned forces and that the people there needed help. Winchester decided to send troops north to drive those forces out. General Harrison had warned against moving too far ahead without proper support, but that warning arrived too late. The Americans advanced toward Frenchtown. On January 18, 1813, American forces reached the settlement. There, they encountered British-Canadian militia and native warriors. The fighting was fierce. The Americans pushed through the settlement and the surrounding area, eventually driving the opposing forces away from Frenchtown. To the Kentucky troops, this felt like a major victory. After the difficult march north, they had taken the settlement. They had shelter, food, and a sense that they were one step closer to retaking Detroit. But that victory would not last. General Winchester arrived with additional troops on January 20, bringing the American force to around 1,000 men. The problem was that their position was vulnerable. Some of the Kentucky militia were protected behind a puncheon fence, which provided some defense, but other troops were placed in exposed positions outside the strongest part of the settlement. Winchester himself stayed across the river from many of his men, weakening communication and command. Warnings came in that a British counterattack was likely, but the Americans did not prepare strongly enough for what was coming. Meanwhile, British Colonel Henry Proctor was gathering a force near Fort Malden in Canada. His force included British regulars, Canadian militia, artillery, and native warriors from several nations. Native leaders associated with the campaign included Roundhead, Splitlog, and Walk in the Water. This was not a small raiding party. It was a coordinated military counterattack aimed at destroying the isolated American force at Frenchtown. Before dawn on January 22, 1813, British and native forces moved into position near the settlement. The Americans were caught off guard. In the darkness and bitter cold, a sentry spotted movement and fired. Almost immediately, British artillery opened up. Cannon fire tore through the morning air. Musket shots followed. Smoke spread across the snow-covered ground. Men shouted orders. Horses moved through the confusion. The quiet settlement of Frenchtown became a battlefield. The Kentucky troops behind the puncheon fence fought hard and held their position for a time. But on the American right flank, the defense collapsed. U.S. regulars and other exposed troops were struck by artillery and musket fire. Native warriors and militia moved around the flank, cutting off escape routes and attacking from multiple directions. Panic spread. Some men tried to retreat across the frozen ground. Others ran toward the river or into the woods. Many were killed as they fled. General Winchester was captured. Under pressure, he agreed to surrender the remaining American troops. The battle was over, but the horror was not. The Second Battle of the River Raisin became one of the worst American defeats of the War of 1812. Hundreds of American soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured. Many of them were Kentucky volunteers, and the loss devastated families back home. But the event that would make River Raisin infamous happened the next day. On January 23, 1813, many wounded American prisoners remained in Frenchtown. They had been placed inside homes because they were too badly injured to march with the other prisoners. Some could not walk. Some were bleeding, freezing, or in shock. Some may have believed they would be protected as prisoners of war. The British left the settlement with those prisoners who could travel, leaving many of the wounded behind under limited protection. The next morning, native warriors returned to Frenchtown. Homes were entered. Some structures were looted and burned. Wounded prisoners were killed. Others were taken away and never seen again. This event became known as the River Raisin Massacre. The exact number of men killed during the massacre has been debated for generations. American accounts often place the number higher, while British accounts gave lower estimates. But the exact number does not lessen the horror of what happened. Wounded men who had survived the battle and surrendered were killed or disappeared in the aftermath. The settlement was devastated. Survivors carried the story with them, and news of the massacre spread quickly. The words, "Remember the Raisin," became a battle cry. It was used to inspire American soldiers, stir public anger, and fuel the determination to strike back. For many Americans, River Raisin became a symbol of betrayal, loss, and revenge. Later in 1813, American forces would retake Detroit and defeat British and native forces at the Battle of the Thames. Tecumseh, the great Shawnee leader, would be killed in that battle, but the memory of River Raisin remained. What makes the story even more tragic is that many of the men who died there were young volunteers, far from home. They had marched north through brutal winter conditions, believing they were defending their country and helping reclaim Detroit. Some died in battle. Some died while running for their lives. Some died after surrendering. Some were wounded and helpless. Some were never properly identified. Some may never have received a proper burial. For the people of Frenchtown, the battle and massacre left a deep wound. Their homes had become shelters, defensive positions, and makeshift hospitals. Their fields had become killing grounds. Their community had been shattered. The river that once supported life became part of a story of bloodshed and grief. The smoke, screams, gunfire, burned buildings, and bodies in the snow would have left a memory that no one who survived could easily forget. This is why the River Raisin battlefield carries such a heavy presence. It was not only a military defeat, it was a human tragedy. It was a place where wounded men cried out from inside homes, where soldiers ran across frozen ground in panic, where civilians witnessed devastation, and where families hundreds of miles away received news that their sons, brothers, husbands, and fathers were dead, missing, or taken prisoner. Today, the battlefield is preserved as River Raisin National Battlefield Park in Monroe, Michigan. The park tells the story of the battles of January 18 and January 22, the massacre of January 23, and the larger struggle for control of the Great Lakes during the War of 1812. It also presents a more complete and complicated history than the battle cry alone. It reminds us that native nations were fighting for survival, land, and sovereignty. It reminds us that the War of 1812 was not simply a war between American and British soldiers. It was a conflict involving settlers, indigenous peoples, soldiers, civilians, and entire communities caught in the path of war. But beyond the history preserved in markers and exhibits, there is another reputation attached to River Raisin. Many people believe the battlefield is haunted. Over the years, visitors and paranormal investigators have reported strange activity at or near the battlefield. The most common reports include apparitions of soldiers, shadow figures, unexplained voices, distant cries, odd lights, orbs, equipment malfunctions, and powerful emotional sensations. Some people describe the site as peaceful on the surface, but heavy underneath, as if the tragedy of January 1813 still lingers in the ground. One of the most frequently reported types of paranormal activity involves apparitions of soldiers. Witnesses have described seeing figures dressed in old military-style clothing moving across parts of the battlefield or standing near the edges of the preserved grounds. These figures are often said to appear only briefly before vanishing. In some reports, the figures look solid at first, almost like living people, until they disappear or are seen in a place where no one should have been standing. Other visitors have reported shadowy figures near tree lines, pathways, or open areas connected to the battlefield. These shadows are not always clearly defined, but witnesses often describe them as moving with purpose. Some appear to walk, others seem to stand and watch. People have also reported feeling observed, especially when walking through quieter areas of the park or visiting when fewer people are present. This feeling is often described as emotional, uneasy, or oppressive, rather than immediately frightening. Unexplained sounds are another major part of the haunting claims. Some people say they have heard distant cries, moans, or shouts. Others describe what sounds like marching, footsteps, movement through brush, or the faint echo of battle. These sounds are often reported as distant and unclear, almost as if they are coming from another time. In the paranormal field, activity like this is often connected to the theory of residual haunting. A residual haunting is believed to be an imprint of the past, rather than a spirit consciously communicating with the living. It is sometimes compared to a recording that plays back under certain conditions. A battlefield like the River Raisin fits that theory well. The location witnessed sudden death, fear, pain, extreme cold, and intense emotional trauma. Some paranormal researchers believe that this kind of energy can become attached to a location, especially when death occurs violently or unexpectedly. Many reported experiences at River Raisin seem to fit this pattern. A figure is seen walking, but does not react. A cry is heard, but no answer. Footsteps move through an area, but no person is found. A shadow crosses the field and disappears. These reports suggest the possibility of echoes from the past rather than direct communication. Other claims suggest something more interactive. Some paranormal investigators have reported electronic voice phenomena, often called EVPs, captured during investigations near the battlefield. EVPs are unexplained voices or sounds that appear on recording devices, but are not clearly heard at the time of recording. At River Raisin, some investigators have claimed to capture voices that seem to answer questions or use words associated with the battlefield, soldiers, pain, fear, or the location's history. Spirit box sessions have also been reported by paranormal groups investigating the battlefield area. A spirit box rapidly scans radio frequencies, and investigators listen for words or phrases that seem to respond to questions. Some groups have claimed to receive words or fragments that they believe were connected to the battle. These findings remain controversial because spirit boxes can pick up radio signals, random audio, and unrelated fragments. But investigators who use them often look for responses that are direct, repeated, and relevant to the questions being asked. Dowsing rods have also been used by some paranormal investigators at or near the River Raisin. Some groups have claimed that the rods responded to questions about soldiers, the battle, and the presence of spirits. As with many paranormal tools, this type of evidence is debated. Skeptics point to the ideomotor effect, in which small unconscious movements of the person holding the rods can cause the rods to move. Still, for investigators who have used them at River Raisin, these sessions have become part of the larger body of reported paranormal experiences connected to the site. There have also been reports of strange lights, flashes, and orbs in photographs and video. Orbs are one of the most debated forms of paranormal evidence. Many can be explained by dust, moisture, pollen, insects, camera flash, or lens effects. An outdoor location near a river can naturally create many of these conditions, especially with humidity, insects, and airborne particles. Still, some visitors and investigators believe they have captured lights that moved in unusual ways or appeared in places with no obvious source. Some people have reported seeing lights with their own eyes, rather than only on camera. These lights are sometimes described as brief flashes or glowing points moving across the area. Natural explanations could include distant headlights, flashlights, reflections, aircraft, insects, or atmospheric effects. But in haunted battlefield folklore, mysterious lights are often associated with restless spirits, lanterns of the dead, or energy moving across the land. Another powerful part of River Raisin's haunted reputation is the emotional atmosphere. Many visitors describe sudden sadness, uneasiness, pressure, nausea, headaches, or the sense that the air feels heavier in certain areas. These sensations are commonly reported at locations tied to mass death or trauma. Some people believe these feelings are caused by spiritual energy or the emotional residue of the dead. Others believe they may come from the visitor's awareness of the history or environment, or from the mind responding to a tragic location. Either way, the feeling can be powerful. Once you understand what happened at River Raisin, the land changes in your mind. A quiet field becomes a battlefield. A river becomes a place where men try to flee. A home site becomes a place where wounded soldiers wait in fear. A cold wind becomes a reminder of January 1813. The history gives every sound and shadow more meaning. Some haunting reports include faint chanting or drumming heard in the distance. These accounts are less common, but they have appeared in local paranormal discussions. Because native warriors played a major role in the battle, some people connect these sounds to the indigenous side of the conflict. This part of the story must be approached with respect. Native people involved in the War of 1812 were not mythical figures or background characters in a ghost story. They were real people fighting for land, sovereignty, and survival during a period of enormous pressure and loss. Any discussion of possible native-related paranormal activity must honor that history and avoid turning it into a stereotype. Reports of screams and cries are also connected to the battlefield. Some witnesses describe hearing distant, human-like cries that seem to come from nowhere. Others have mentioned short, sharp sounds that could not be traced. Given the massacre and the suffering of wounded prisoners, it is easy to understand why cries in the night became part of the haunted folklore. Skeptics may point to wildlife, wind, distant voices, or other natural causes. Believers may hear something else, the echo of men who died in fear and pain. Paranormal enthusiasts have also discussed photographs taken at or near the battlefield. Some people claim to see faces, figures, or human shapes in the background of images. These claims are difficult to verify. Trees, shadows, markers, distant visitors, and natural patterns can easily create the appearance of faces or bodies. This is called pareidolia, the human brain's tendency to see familiar shapes in random patterns. Still, some images remain interesting to those who captured them, especially when they believe no one else was present in the area at the time. One of the most haunting ideas connected to River Raisin is that some spirits may not realize the battle is over. This is a common theme in battlefield hauntings. Soldiers who died suddenly may be seen still marching, standing guard, retreating, or moving through the same areas where they died. If witnesses have truly seen figures in military clothing at River Raisin, those apparitions could be interpreted as soldiers still trapped in the final moments of January 1813. The wounded prisoners are another major focus of the paranormal stories. Some investigators believe that the strongest energy at River Raisin may be connected not only to the battle itself, but to the massacre that followed. Battle is violent and chaotic, but the killing of wounded prisoners carries a different emotional weight. These men had survived the fighting. Some had surrendered. Some were too injured to move. They may have believed they would be treated as prisoners, or eventually exchanged. Instead, they were left behind, vulnerable and helpless. The homes of Frenchtown, many of which are long gone, are central to this part of the story. In January of 1813, homes became defensive positions, shelters, and makeshift hospitals. Wounded soldiers suffered inside those buildings, waiting to learn whether they would live or die. The thought of men lying in pain, hearing movement outside, unsure whether help or death was approaching, gives the site a deeply personal and chilling atmosphere. That may explain why some investigators and visitors report heavy sensations near areas associated with the settlement. They describe sadness, pressure, dread, or the feeling of being surrounded. Some believe these sensations are connected to the wounded's final emotions. Others believe the land itself holds the trauma. Whether paranormal or psychological, these experiences have strongly contributed to the battlefield's haunted reputation. River Raisin is also associated with stories of unfinished business. Many soldiers died far from home. Some families never received full closure. Some bodies were not recovered immediately. Some names were lost in the confusion. Some men disappeared into the chaos of battle and massacre. In paranormal belief, unfinished business is one of the most common reasons spirits are believed to remain attached to a place. At River Raisin, that idea feels especially powerful because so many lives ended suddenly and violently, without peace. Visitors and investigators have also reported equipment malfunctions, camera issues, and batteries draining unexpectedly. These reports are common at haunted locations, though cold weather, old batteries, device settings, or normal technical problems can also cause them. Because the River Raisin tragedy happened in winter, cold conditions can play a major role in equipment issues. Still, when devices fail unexpectedly in a location known for death and paranormal claims, investigators often take note. Sound is another important part of the River Raisin mystery. Open land, nearby roads, water, wind, trees, and modern buildings can all affect how sound travels. At the battlefield, distant noises may carry strangely or become distorted. A faraway voice may seem closer than it really is. A vehicle may sound like a low rumble. Wind may resemble whispers. Water and marshland can change how sound travels through the area, These natural factors make investigation difficult, but they also create an eerie soundscape that fits the site's haunted reputation. Still, some witnesses insist the sounds they heard were too close, too clear, or too unusual to dismiss. Footsteps are among the most common reports. They may sound like boots moving over ground, someone walking through leaves, or movement just out of sight. At River Raisin, invisible footsteps clearly indicate soldiers moving through the settlement, advancing toward combat, or running during the retreat. There are also stories of musket fire, or cannon-like sounds heard when no reenactment or public event was taking place. These sounds are usually described as faint and distant, not like modern gunfire. In residual haunting theory, battlefield sounds may replay under certain conditions, almost like an echo of combat. Similar claims have been made at other battlefields across the country. River Raisin, with its documented violence and emotional weight, fits that same pattern. The anniversary dates connected to the battle are also important. The first battle occurred on January 18, the second and most devastating battle on January 22, and the massacre on January 23. Some people believe paranormal activity can increase around anniversary dates, especially at locations tied to sudden death or tragedy. Whether that is true or not, the emotional power of those dates is undeniable. Each January, the battlefield's history feels especially close. The phrase "remember the Raisin" also has a haunting quality of its own. It was born from grief, anger, and shock. It turned a battlefield defeat into a lasting symbol. Those words carried the memory of the dead into later battles and into American history. Every time the phrase is spoken, it calls back the men who died, the wounded who were killed, and the families who mourned them. In that way, River Raisin is haunted not only by reported spirits, but by memory itself. One reason paranormal investigators are drawn to River Raisin is that the history is real and documented. The battles happened. The massacre happened. Men died there. Survivors told what they saw. The community was devastated. Unlike some haunted legends built mostly on rumor, River Raisin's foundation is a historical fact. That does not prove the paranormal claims, but it gives them weight. It explains why people feel the site could be haunted. At the same time, history must always come first. River Raisin should never be treated only as a ghost story. It is a battlefield, a memorial, and a place of education. The paranormal claims are part of the modern folklore surrounding the site, but the human story is the foundation. Without the history, the hauntings have no meaning. With the history, every reported voice, shadow, cold spot, light, or unexplained sound becomes connected to something much deeper. The paranormal findings reported by other groups remain interesting, but not definitive. Investigators have claimed to have experienced EVPs, spirit box responses, dowsing rod communication, apparitions, strange lights, shadow figures, emotional impressions, and unexplained battlefield sounds. Some believe they have contacted soldiers. Some believe they have detected energy connected to the massacre. Others believe the site is more residual than intelligent, with the past replaying itself rather than spirits directly communicating with the living. No single piece of public evidence has settled the question, and the battlefield remains a mystery. That may be exactly why River Raisin continues to fascinate people. It does not give easy answers. Its history is layered with military mistakes, frontier fear, cultural conflict, grief, survival, propaganda, and memory. Its haunting stories are just as layered. If spirits remain there, who are they? Are they Kentucky soldiers still trying to find their way home? Are they wounded men still waiting inside vanished houses? Are they native warriors whose side of the story has too often been overlooked? Are they civilians who witnessed the destruction of Frenchtown? Or is the activity not intelligent at all, but an emotional recording left behind by fear, violence, and death? Those questions are what make River Raisin so compelling. It is not simply a place where people claim to have seen ghosts. It is a place where history feels unresolved. It is a location where official history and paranormal folklore overlap. It is a place where silence feels heavy, where wind can sound like a whisper, and where the memory of January 1813 still seems to linger. The River Raisin battlefield reminds us that hauntings are not always about fear. Sometimes they are about remembrance. Sometimes the dead do not appear to frighten us, but to make sure they are not forgotten. Whether the voices people report are spirits, residual echoes, environmental effects, or the human mind reacting to tragedy, the place's message remains powerful. Something terrible happened there. Real people suffered there. Real people died there. Their story still matters. When visitors walk the grounds today, they are walking through one of the most tragic places in Michigan history. They are walking where soldiers stood behind fences as cannon fire split the morning air. They are walking where men ran through snow in a desperate attempt to survive. They are walking near the places where wounded prisoners waited in fear. They are walking through a landscape where a settlement became a battlefield, and a battlefield became a legend. The haunting reports may never be fully proven. Some people will believe them, others will dismiss them. Some will remain open to the possibility. But no one can understand what happened at River Raisin and call it an ordinary place. It has weight, it has sorrow, it has memory. And for those who believe in the paranormal, it may also have voices, still calling from the shadows of 1813. The Battle of the River Raisin was a turning point in the War of 1812, and one of the defining tragedies in Michigan history. The massacre that followed turned defeat into a rallying cry. Remember the Raisin became a phrase born from death, grief, and anger. More than 200 years later, those words still echo through history. And perhaps, if the stories are true, something else echoes there as well. Maybe it is the sound of footsteps moving across frozen ground. Maybe it is a cry carried on the wind. Maybe it is the voice of a wounded soldier asking for help. Maybe it is a shadow moving where no living person stands. Or maybe it is the land itself, holding on to the memory of what happened, refusing to let the world forget. The River Raisin battlefield is more than a historical site. It is a place of tragedy, memory, and mystery. It is one of Michigan's most important battlefields and most haunting locations. Whether you visit as a historian, a paranormal investigator, or someone simply trying to understand the past, River Raisin leaves an impression. It reminds us that history is not always buried. Sometimes it remains just beneath the surface. Sometimes it whispers through the trees. Sometimes it waits in the quiet places. This has been Macomb Paranormal Investigations and Research. I am your host, Don Alter. Until next time, always look into the shadows, remember those who came before us, and happy hauntings.